Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the channel. Chef Joseph back at you again with another video. And man, I got a lot of subjects. You know what I'm saying? And just realizing that when you look at all of the years of experience that you have, man, you need to start documenting those things because you have a story to tell. So with that being said, this is another subject that came at me this I think it was yesterday it kind of came to me, but I was led to go ahead and drop it today. And today's subject, excuse me, real quick, it is November 4th, Wednesday, Tuesday or Wednesday, November 4th. And today's subject is what are you aiming for? What are you aiming for? And yes, it's Tuesday, November 4th, around 8 o'clock a.m. But today's subject is what are you aiming for? That's a pretty loaded question because it's so much going on in the world today that it's hard to maintain focus for some people. You know, so much happening with EBT, so much happening with food stamps, so much happening with Section 8, and with these things going on, it's like being in a whirlwind. You know what I'm saying? That it's hard to maintain focus. That's why being connected to the right people is essential in times like this. Seriously. But even with everything going on, let's talk about what are you aiming for? What is your end goal? Do you have an end goal? What is an end goal? Everyone has been born with a purpose, something to do. And sometimes it's very easy to get lost into other people's narratives. I was a salesman. I'm a salesman because my father was a salesman. My grandfather was a salesman. My great granddad was a salesman, and and so forth down the line. But what happens when you look up and you realize I've actually been aiming for something that I'm not quite resonating with? It's not quite resonating with me. So here I find myself aiming for something that I don't think would be in my future. Let me give you a real example. I used to have my own barbershop, right? And salon. And I owned my own barbershop. And yeah, it was a small town thing. And yeah, we did really well. People loved us there in the city. And I never in my, like, in a million years thought I would be a barber. Let me just tell you how I, came into barbering. This is years ago, I don't know, 20 years ago maybe. What happened was I went to a barbershop to get a haircut. And what happened was the barber had messed up my haircut. I was going to get a fade. Well, it didn't turn out so well. So I was like, you know what, just cut it all off. You know what I'm saying? It's cool. I'm going to rock a bald head. It's not a problem. It'll grow back. But and that's when I wasn't working. That's when I was going through some of the things that y'all see when the book drops and everything. But I asked the guy, I said, hey man, while he was cutting my hair, I said, man, are y'all hiring? And at the time, I couldn't even cut hair. Like I said, I cut hair at the house when I was younger. You and your cousins, y'all cut each other's hair, stuff like that with clippers that you get from Walmart. But I wasn't, professionally trained. So the guy was like, yeah, I think we're hiring, but give me a number. So a couple of weeks later, another guy called me from another barbershop. And shout out to Chopper. You know what I'm saying? And Chopper, yeah, phenomenal story, phenomenal person. A lot of lessons that he taught us as young barbers that we learned a lot from him basically. And what happened was I went on to become a barber. From literally not knowing how to cut hair to cutting hair and owning my own shop eventually with other barbers that subbed out the chairs and things like that. But let me tell y'all something, right? So I was cutting hair, and it was definitely a good profession. I was making money. People knew my name. They knew the barbershop name. They knew the other barbers that were there, and we did a professional service. It was cool. Let me tell you what happened. One day I looked up and I realized, like, I think somewhere along the way, I seen other people's work. That's what it was. I seen other haircuts just from different areas of the city. And I never said anything, but I said it to myself. I was like, I could clearly see a difference between people who are called to do something and people who are just doing something just to be doing it. I was one of those people that was in a craft doing something just to be doing it. That's what happened with me. And when I really seen that, I was like, am I even supposed to be cutting hair? Am I supposed to even be cutting hair? Because my work clearly was not anywhere on the level of what I seen at all. Not saying my work was bad, but it wasn't in my heart. Barbering and cutting hair was not my passion. It was not in my heart to do. I did it to make money. And that's why I tell a lot of you, don't do anything just because of money. Now, don't get me wrong. You may have to take a job to make extra money. You know what I'm saying? Because you're trying to get to your next level. But don't ever find yourself stuck in a craft that you're just there to make money. Because eventually you're going to have enough money, or you may have enough money, and you may look around like I did and be like, I'm not happy. Why am I doing this? All those type of questions. And because I've always been a pretty spiritually in tune man, I started having feelings of guilt. And it was the spirit just showing me, like, how are you and why are you taking money from people and your heart is not in it? Pretty serious, huh? Why are you taking people's money and your heart is not in it? What are you in this for? Those type of questions that you can't run from, you know. And that's when I decided to close my barbershop down. At the time, the barbers that were under me, I made sure that they were master barbers. I left their paperwork. I mean, I've trained them how to cut hair, several. And I left all the necessary paperwork. When I closed, I left all of their paperwork so they could take it to the state board and get their licenses. I did right by those folks. Not those folks, but by my brethren, you know. And so to put them on their path. And guess what? To this day, they're still cutting hair. Man, isn't that amazing how you sow seeds into people's lives? I'm saying that to say I wasn't aiming for anything in particular. In particular, I was just doing something just to be doing it. That was the reason, which that was not a good reason for me to do it. You know, and so which brings me into the subject for today, like, what are you aiming for? You know, there's so much going on in the world, as I just said, but it's very important for you to have an aim, you know, a target, something to aim for, something to go for, a goal. That's very important. So many of you do not have goals for yourself. I'm not judging you. I'm just saying I talk to people like every day, and I've encountered so many people who are dressed the part, who look the part, who make money for the part. And there was one conversation last week. A lady that came up, and we were just talking, and some. It was dealing with sales and stuff, and how the economy is slowing down. And she was like, "Well, I don't know what I'm going to be doing." This is just a straight up customer, somebody I just know and through business stuff. And as a pretty seasoned entrepreneur, I would like to say that I asked. I said, "So what is your goal? Like, what is your passion? Like, because I know you're in sales, but what is your goal? What are you aiming for?" And she was like, "I don't know. I might go back to community college. You know, I wasn't saying anything. Again, this is not coming from no perspective of judgment whatsoever. But she didn't even know. And she's probably in her, well, guessing me, because I never asked her age, but anywhere between 45 and 53, you know. But that's kind of dangerous because you don't have a person doesn't, and this is no shade to her. She doesn't have an aim. What is she good at? And she clearly said she doesn't. She doesn't know. You know. So I'm saying that to say to you that it's very imperative that you find your aim. What are you aiming for? What are your goals? That's something you don't hear a lot of people talking about anymore. You know, where are they headed in life? And then on top of that, you know, we get into these relationships where two people don't have a definite goal. I picked up a lesson. Yeah. I'm trying to think where I got this lesson from. I'm gonna pass this to you. In my years of studying, this came to me well over 20 years ago when I was studying in my spiritual time. There are three causes for failure for a man or a woman. Three causes. Y'all ready? There are three top causes that will cause someone to possibly fail in life. Not fail, because there's no such thing as failure. Actually, there's learning lessons, learning experiences. So if you go through bad things or challenging times in your life, you know what I'm saying, that doesn't mean that it's a failure. You know what I'm saying? But you need to learn to transcend and transmute that energy. That's a whole nother conversation. Transmutation. You know, that's another thing. Yeah, I'll leave that alone. But yeah, that's a whole new thing as far as transmuting situations that seem to be negative, and you turn them into positive. Like and subscribe to the channel, yo. So there's three top causes for failure for anyone, whether it be man, whether it be woman, whether it be white, whether it be black, whether it be Chinese, whoever you are, whatever you are. You dig? Three top causes. One, on the top of the list for failure, lack of a definite aim. That's number one. That's one of the number one causes for failure for people who basically will fail or not succeed. It's called lack of a definite aim. You know what I'm saying? If you look at marksmen, they study their targets. You know what I'm saying? They study their targets. And they may study it for minutes, they may study it for hours, they may study their target for days, weeks, months. But once they release that pew, 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 they're not gonna miss. Because guess what? They knew what they were aiming at. So, lack of a definite aim. Lack of definite aim. For real. What are you aiming for? Number two. Yeah. The wrong selection of a mate. That's number two. Top failures for anyone, man or woman. The wrong selection of a mate. You got to be careful who you intertwine with. You know what I'm saying? Because there's nothing worse than being in a relationship with someone who you can't share ideas with, you can't grow with, you can't build with. It's no shade against the person. That's who you chose. They may be phenomenal people. They may be phenomenal. But what is it like to be laying next to someone that you can't even share innovation with? Shout out to me. Very much aware of those lessons. And that's why I keep it cool. You know what I'm saying? Don't got time to waste. None of that. You dig? Wrong selection of a mate. So those of you who are in relationships, I'm not telling you to break up. I'm not advising you to do whatever. I am saying you need to really look to see if that person is sharing the same mindset as you. Because eventually, y'all might start here, and somebody want to do this. They want to go to school to further their career. You know, they want to elevate. Well, this person right here, what you going to do that for? They don't want to elevate. So how is that going to work? I mean, this person going to have to come down. That means they're going to have to downplay their self, just to meet that person on that level. You know what I'm saying? And that's always dangerous when you have to lower your vibration to meet someone else's vibrational match. That's very dangerous. You know what I'm saying? Let's talk about number three. Intemperance of sex habit. You didn't think that was gonna come. You didn't see that one coming, did you? Yeah, a lot of people don't. Intemperance of sex habits. You know, we're put here to love one another, man and woman, or however you want to identify your lane. That's your call. But we're put here to love one another. On the surface. You know what I'm saying? We're put here to love deeply and to partner with people and all these type of things. And I've seen many relationships ruined because of sex. It's a beautiful process. It's definitely a transference of energy. And I know that I don't, and I will never advise anyone to be intimate with anyone if you're not on that same frequency. You know what I'm saying? Because that's when you're dealing with soul ties. But intemperate sex habits will lead to a lot of different causes for not so good situations. One, having children out of wedlock. You know, that is to be determined by the person who decides to do what y'all do. But nothing wrong with having children. But if you're going to have children, make sure it's with the right person that you intend to be with. That's for sure. Um, I've experienced that once. Seriously. And if you're gonna be intimate, make sure it's with purpose, because again, you are taking on that person's energy, who they've been with, what they've been through, and all that, and so forth and so on. And then vice versa, they're taking on your energy, everything that you've been through and who you've been with, so forth and so on. And then you're bringing these two energies together that may have a hard time fitting together. See what I'm saying? And so yeah, so that's why, like, if you're gonna date somebody, yo, I tell them quick. Like I said on the last video, it's a beautiful process, but you need to know and get to know who you're gonna be, who you're being with. You know what I'm saying? Because if you are an entrepreneur and you're going to that next phase in business, you don't have time to get stuck with a partner who is not, on your same wavelength. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I just want to drop that on you today as far as what are you aiming for. And if you don't know, you can literally, again, define your goals. Ask the universe to send it to you. You know what I'm saying? As far as your direction, where are you supposed to go? What are you doing with your life? It's very important, because you don't want to look up and you've wasted years of life, with a person who refuses to grow. Again, I had a situation like I was talking about. I mentioned it a little bit in a couple of videos ago, where I know this particular individual, nothing intimate or anything, but I just know this individual through business, and it's a situation where they're stuck with a person who refuses to grow. And what's happening from wisdom's perspective, you can't take grown men with you, respectfully. You just can't. You have a whole grown man or a grown woman, let's flip it around, who refuses to grow. How do you do that? How do you do that? You know what I'm saying? You gotta, sometime in life, let the universe teach people. You do. And I'm convinced no woman, and y'all know, no woman can raise a whole able-bodied man. It's not her duty, it's not her job. Some of y'all are with men who refuse to grow, and vice versa. Some of you men are with women who refuse to grow. But I'm bringing that all into the subject of, basically, what are you aiming for? Because if you're aiming for something great, just know your connectivity and what you're connected to, who you connected to, is imperative. It is imperative for you to know the difference, so you can stay away from those traps. You know what I'm saying? That don't mean you can't be friends, don't mean you can't go out. But if y'all not aiming in the same direction, yo, it could be catastrophic for you and your growth. Like the channel, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for listening. I'm glad y'all here for another day. Again, I'm not in this game for money like that. This is just the things that you will experience, you will go through or experience as an entrepreneur. So these are just some of the lessons that I've learned, to share with you, to share with the world about things that you should really be mindful of, before you move into your next season. Actually, we're moving into 2026, but we'll talk about that. But anyway, like and subscribe. Thanks for your time to even listen, you know, to Chef Joseph. I'm the hot sauce man, as they call it. But we'll talk about that later. But thanks. Y'all have a wonderful day. Like and subscribe. And again, I'm open for consultations if y'all need to, and we can talk about that later. So have a good one, and peace and blessings to you and yours.